shift is when we come to understand what we've always somehow really known, that our mind, our emotions, our physical body, and everything it contains are our vehicles. They are vehicles of the soul. They are functions for expression. The total sum of these functions we call the personality. So, mind, emotions, and body, in some teachings, are called the three bodies of man, the vehicles of the soul, because they carry some of the soul qualities that eventually start to awaken as we develop through self-expression and consciousness. Our body is, of course, made up of energy, and our senses and our five senses together form what we know as a single system. It is designed for us to perceive physical reality, our environment. It is designed for us to interact with the world around us. But then the perceptions of an extrasensory human being stretch beyond physical reality to a much larger dynamical system, of which our physical reality is just a part. In other words, we start to realize that we have a soul, a sacred self. By now we know our personality is made up of every experience we've ever had or undertaken. But eventually it becomes multisensory. It develops intuition, inner dings and hunches and subtle feelings, perceptions that are really beyond the physical, beyond these senses. And that's when the fun starts. That's when the paradigm shift begins. Once you've done the work, it can be quite mind-boggling to go and see someone who is adamant, who is a believer that everything has happened by accident, that there is nothing. They believe the five senses were created simply for a short time, for pleasure, for self-indulgence. But life will have us all do the work eventually. We will all come to understand that our soul, our spiritual self, is our innermost self, while our personality is our outer self. Now, we've always said that spirituality is looking inwards, while the personality looks at the outer self, our sacred self looks at our innermost self. In other words, our innermost self is our soul, and our outer self is our mask. A mask designed, of course, to protect us from all the pain and suffering that we think we cannot bear. And indeed, there must have been a time that we couldn't bear it. The truth. Our sacred self is discovered. Our five senses help us get there. This personality that we integrate and dissolve into ourselves refers to all we identify with as our thinking, feelings, perceptions, and behaviors. That spiritual self is what we call I. When we start to observe our thinking, we think, who am I? And what a good question that is. So to put it bluntly, comes a time in most of our lives where we've become hopeless, somewhat loveless, and faithless. When we look at culture, religion, our ethnic groups, genders, and the species as a whole, from this outer self, we can become easily disillusioned. We look at disintegrating social structures and think it's a bad thing. We look at the creation stories and we doubt. We don't really understand why it has to be the way it has to be. But of course, that's just the beginning. That outer shell needs to be made. How could we, when we were young, naive, under a veil of ignorance, How could we understand that a new consciousness is replacing the entire human race? That personalities are being replaced with spiritual selves. That external power is being replaced with internal power. Of course, today you can see that the world strives only, we think only, for external power. If you switch on the news, that's what you'll see. You'll see us looking at our abilities and ways to manipulate and control, to find power, how to harness energy and resources. But look where we push them at the end of the day. Look how we respond when someone creates a war. We add more war, more bombs, and we look for peace under those bombs. But we've never found it. Yet tomorrow, we will do it again. That's the personality. Yet it's easy to see if we look contemplatively at the last 100,000 years or so, that consciousness is evolving. Science, religion, and spirituality have met in a multisensory and extrasensory way. The hard problem of science is breaking through the persona and asking what we've always asked. Why are we really here? But our task as seekers here with the paradigm process is to answer that question. That will give us a sense of certainty, an anchor that we can hold on to forever as we lean into uncertainty, mystery, and the unknown. That's how we grow. Walking through dark spaces, finding new light. So consciousness is not limited to those 5 senses, and anyone doing this course right now is an extrasensory human being. That is unprecedented, epic transformation. But of course, either everything is a miracle or nothing is. We must understand what a miracle this journey back home is. If you understand synchronicity, power of intention, intuition, all of these multisensory perceptions, then you will understand that you are not still operating from a place of personality alone. Rather, you are integrating what once served you. Who thought one day we would lose our personalities and create a new one? In each of our families, in each of our businesses, in each of our lives, there are people who have become stuck in the first half of life. They're experiencing one type of fight, flight, or freeze, one type or another, that has been entrenched from years of thinking, feeling, and behaving in certain ways. This is the most common formulation of personality, which is all focused on survival. Ways that once worked for us in childhood no longer work for us as adults. It's a prison of personality that makes people depressed and stressed, and tension soon follows any kind of stuckness. Of course, we're here to grow. When the personality is no longer serving you but hindering you, you need a new program. First, we try and fix the old one. We try and upgrade it to version 2. We try and do a tweak here and an addition there, but nothing works other than surrender, letting go of that control. A jump across is so necessary. One day we will do that jump as we leave our physical bodies. But right now, we're doing the physical, psychological, and emotional work. Knowing at some point that we needed to run a new program is something that precedes our paradigm shift, healing, or change by years. We know that we need to make that change long before we do it. That is fear. That is what your pleaser is based in. your anxious insurgent, your judge. Could we find the way where we thought we would never find it, in stillness, through meditation practice, contemplative practice, through developing a new understanding of how our body, heart, minds work. We find it through changing thoughts, beliefs, energetics. To seek this paradigm shift, we begin to action and take ourselves on a journey, tackling each mask that we've put up, removing it layer by layer, and then replacing those masks with the highest energies, concepts, and attitudes that we have. We replace our anxiety with courage. We replace that judge who separates everything with a new understanding and wisdom. At the end of it all, there are only two emotions: fear and love. Both are the basis for a trillion different emotions in between. But in the end, when we're looking at black and white, there is fear and love. Our personalities are based on subjective experiences. They're based on how we interacted with our environment. When our basic needs are met, they are replaced with ones that are increasingly complex. It gets so complex that we become confused, even more fearful. The most common causes of fear are darkness or loss of visibility of our surroundings. We're terrified of heights and flying. We're also terrified of social interaction and rejection. Then, of course, comes snakes, rodents, and spiders. But what we're most fearful of is a lack of love. Love that won't be there if we act in a wrong way. And this is where the sacred texts are written. Thousands of pages of biblical texts, sacred texts, all written to say, love will never leave you. But we doubt in the dark what God told us in the light. The main function of fear and anxiety is to act as a signal of danger, of threat. These dangers and threats motivate us to trigger appropriate adaptive responses that just no longer serve us. We're the last to know when we've been a victim for a decade or two, until we consciously shift through a paradigm process. Fear, jealousy, anger, and hopelessness, all happening outside ourselves. They are the ways we respond to catastrophes. But today, with the consciousness you have, you can choose love no matter what that takes. Every time you respond, you can respond with love. Depression, obsession of the mind, compulsions of the body, all of these are expressions of fear. Fear that creates painful consequences for us. Of course, the mind cannot do consequences. That's why we continue obsessing. We continue letting self-will and ego run riot. When we're operating from sacred self, we understand first and foremost that joy, happiness, bliss, and reality are all powers that reign from within. When we want to create joy after depression, we start with self-love. We start with any kind of love, but of course we build self-love first. Without building the self, everything else would fall. And so it is with the chakras, with the rainbow bridge from our root to our stomachs, to our heart, to the words that we speak, then to the thoughts that we think. All a rainbow bridge towards more and more consciousness. Fear and doubt, represented as red in the chakra system, these energy centers, represents the personality. As we start to develop emotionally, we start to speak differently. We start to think differently. We start to move beyond physical sensation. Importantly, we shift from suppressing emotions that we have, thoughts that we have. We let go of them. Thoughts we have of control to try and prevent our feelings of being out of control, we know are sensations, inner experiences that no longer work for us. So we let them go. We start to be conscious of our perfectionist. And when we're grinding away, when we're postponing appointments, tasks, and duties because we want to be more prepared, more perfect, we stop, we let go, and we recover a deep sense of gratitude. When we do this, joy returns. We start to put our attention on the loving parts of our personality. When we stop judging, we're resisting destructive impulses that are now neural pathways in our bodies. When love comes to town, when love infuses your words, your deeds, all kinds of fear and anger, resentment, jealousy, all despair and hopelessness are infused, they're dissolved. We see them as frightened parts, fearful parts of who we are, and we go above them. Transform. That's what we do. That's the shift. We stay creative. We stay open. We stay resilient and present. The more we practice this process, the easier and more natural it becomes. So here's the important part. When feelings become the means of thinking, or if we cannot think greater than how we are actually feeling in our bodies, we can never ever change. To change and transform, this is the how. To change and transform, we need to understand that the familiar feelings that we have memorized into personality are never going to change us. They will always stay the same. What you think, feel, and do has to be greater than the body and the mind and the senses. Take, for example, a long-term memory. Take our example of where you were when the planes flew into the towers in New York City. Where were you? What did the TV look like? What was going on? If you were around, you will remember. Your brain takes a snapshot and puts it into long-term memory. When we think about the events that have happened to us in the past, all of them together, they produce in our bodies the same chemistry. The body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between a real-life experience and the emotions and our imagination. So a stimulus and response from a thought and a feeling that we get that could have come from years and years ago bring around a certain response. So if I feel anxious, depressed, empty, and unworthy, and I don't know how to change it, I mustn't look again to whatever it is in my outer world to change that. It's going to be extrasensory. It's going to be internal. No longer can we be a victim to our environments. We will always remember emotional stress. When someone goes to a psychologist, attends a center, or even goes into a health store, 4 out of 5 people are coming there to get help for emotional stress. takes people years to understand what are the emotions connected to my stress hormones. Of course, they're anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, competition, and control. Essentially, it's all powerlessness. So psychology calls these normal states of consciousness, but no, they are altered states of consciousness. Our responses to our own thoughts are fearful. It causes chemicals to be secreted from our brains into our bodies and nervous systems to believe that it is living in a dangerous environment, minute after minute and hour after hour. So we think a thought of our past memory, regardless of whether it's true or not, the body and the mind respond as if it was. So once thoughts and feelings, images and feelings were our stimulus and response reactions, our 5 sensory reactions to everything that happened to us in our world. Are we starting to understand psychological sickness better? We should be. It's a scientific fact that the long-term effects of acting and feeling like this are going to create hormones of stress that are going to make you sick. This is the mind-body connection. So what we need to do is show up for ourselves. We're going to need to start managing ourselves. And that's where it gets a little bit weird, because you need to show up for yourself. You need to take yourself for a walk. When you are stressed, you need to sit yourself down. Life is practical. Keep it simple. When your mind wanders in a meditation, you need to bring it back. Where focus goes, energy flows. The body has become the mind, and so we are fabricating our world. The body is believing it's being chased by predators and saber-toothed tigers, or it's continuously feeling offended, so it feels it must be ready to defend or attack. So it's in emergency. It's called an autonomic nervous system. It keeps you ready for these threats, poised, adrenalized, waiting to respond in the fraction of a second. Real or imagined danger. The body and the mind have become conditioned, programmed, and addicted to act a certain way. And of course, then we sense feeling out of control, and we try and put on the mask of control, which makes things and matters far worse. So we are addicted to our thinking, our own thoughts. That's our personality and our identity. And we start living a life that we don't really want. These rushes of energy become addictive. But now when it comes time to change, stop being deeply pressed, it's difficult. To stop anything will bring a hangover. It will bring cravings because the body, the chemicals, all are wired to fire in this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our state of being. That's transformation. We're going to change our personality. These feelings of anxiety, becoming a victim of a predator, at some point we've got to see they are false evidence appearing real. We're going to have to question our thoughts and say, is this thought actually true? So you question yourself. When you question yourself, your beliefs, which is a thought you just think over and over again until it becomes subconscious. So we need to become conscious of our subconscious thoughts. Now, and in this way, you put your body into rehab. The subconscious mind is 95% of who we are. That's the power of the personality. So when you think you've been making all your decisions on what you eat, how you behave, how you respond, and what you do, think again. You might be kind, loving, and compassionate, but you don't respond that way because of your thoughts, your memories of the past, these emotions that are stuck in fight or flight. Remember that keeping the same personality, the same identity, is how we fulfill our most basic need of certainty. Of course, staying the same is our most basic need. It's built and geared for survival. So for transformation to happen, you're going to have to think outside, greater than what you've done before. Otherwise, there's no change. That's the trick of the personality. So let's get practical now. That's what this talk is about. Yoga, mindfulness, meditation, contemplation, Pilates, exercise, walking meditations. You're going to do them, but you're going to do them differently from a place and a source of soul, of sacred self. You're going to have to stretch yourself by doing things with intention and assigning meaning, new meaning of why you are doing these activities. You're going to have to progress, grow. You're going to have to move past pain thresholds that you thought were your limits and boundaries. Stay with me now, because that is change. Anything else is personality insanity. So when you do this, your body, heart, brain is going to get stronger, more supple and flexible. From today, when you take a vitamin, when you put an orange into your body, do it with intention. Intention is 5 sensory. Assign new meaning to what you're doing. Thoughts become things. You are going to start taking care of the physical. Your soul, your sacred self, is going to start taking care of your emotional. I'm feeling exhausted and drained because my thoughts and my feelings are weakening me. So now we're doing the physical things. We're doing the chemical things. We're dropping self-judgment, that insurgent. You are going to balance you emotionally. The moment you return back to old emotions, you're going to return back to old memories. You're going to go into the past. You're going to live in the past. Don't wait for crisis. You are going to take new signals to your cells, new choices to your cells, 1 of a trillion at a time. What we're saying here is if you truly want balance, newness, presence in your life, you're going to have to self-regulate. Pathway number 8. You're going to have to let go of old emotions, thoughts, and feelings that no longer serve you, that served your personality. We've got to understand that getting back into balance means going from your root, your basics, your fear, your anxiety, your stress. And creating balance means you've got to open your heart, because when you open your heart, a rush of new energy flows into a different part of your brain, our CEO, our prefrontal cortex. The emotions that keep us in our limited animal states are based in fear and anxiety. Emotions are energy. So we shift our emotions, we shift our energy. You cannot go into your future, create something new, by holding on to the emotions of your past. So you start feeling surrender, connection. You start feeling gratitude. You start feeling self-love. You start feeling resilience, and you get that heart of yours back into balance. The heart is love. It's emotion. The heart is the creative center. It tells the brain it's safe to create something new, something beautiful. Body, heart, brain coherence is exceptionally, exceptionally important. That is balance. Creative states create pictures, images and emotions that are going to change your life, change the program. When your brain and heart are hooked up, miracles happen. Your heart waves, your brain waves change. This will get your brain into an alpha state. Alpha state is a quantum state where everything's possible. We keep balance, we keep relaxed. Delta waves carry theta waves. Theta carry alpha waves. High beta waves create gamma waves. That's where sixth sensory stuff happens, extrasensory stuff. Gamma waves are imagination. Imagination brings bliss, new reality and consciousness. Brain waves that are creating new patterns, they are running harmonically. When that happens, whether it's meditation or something else, you start to feel whole. This is when you connected personality to spirituality. When you're in wholeness like this, you can create something new. When you show up and exercise the will of your sacred self. So let's get this. The same people, places, and things. Now, research shows this. The same people, places, and things, the same environment is going to trigger in you the same thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So when you're around the boss that you don't like, it's going to trigger those same thoughts, feelings, and emotions that have always been there. But when you show up and you change the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, you change the environment. We use meditation to rehearse change. The mind is not going to know the difference between imagined and real people, places, and things. So that's what the CQ meditations are for, to rehearse change. The body, heart, brain thinks that that change has happened. So you've got to remind yourself how not to allow your personality to think. You remind yourself how you're not going to feel. You remind yourself enough times with practice so you don't forget. Then you rehearse what you're going to do, what you're going to think. Beforehand, this is intention. You rehearse so that you don't default back to memories of the past, back to personality programming. If you lose it, if you revert back, you develop conscious awareness to pull yourself out of it faster and faster, and you try again. In this way, we progress without perfection. We progress with connection, with intention. If you're able to maintain your new modified state of sacred self-thinking, feeling, and behaving, change is coming. Wonderful things are coming. What you want to create is coming. When you start seeing the miracles happen, the changes unfold, that's feedback. You're going to see it in front of you, and it's going to reinforce even more change beyond boundaries, beyond what you thought were your limits. Because let's face it, look at what people do. There just are no limits. This work of a paradigm shift is the 4-minute mile, once again. It is breaking the bonds of what you thought was possible. And people are healing their bodies, healing their minds, healing their hearts, and returning to sacred self. Of course, that's the journey back home. When you see what you've created manifest in your life, that's when things get exciting. That's when you see a paradigm shift shifted, and it's a beautiful thing. Practice makes change. It makes connection, resilience, wisdom creates courage. And all of these things are not subconscious mind elements. They are conscious mind elements. Now, conscious mind, which was 5% of your 95% of subconscious, is starting to change. You're getting beyond the analytical, calculating mind, and that's a miracle in itself. So you're flipping 95 to 5, 1% at a time. You've got to learn how to change your brain waves, how to slow them down, how to get beyond the personality and the analytical mind and the programs you've been running. Practice daily. Do mind yoga. Once you are slowing brain waves down, changing heart rate variability, conscious mind has taken charge. Even when your body is still saying that you're miserable and depressed and anxious, you're going above it. You're going beyond the limits of these things and changing them. You're changing anxiety and depression and stress with the conscious mind, 1% at a time. So let's wake up to what we do. Let's wake up to social media. Let's wake up to spreading gossip and negative things about people and the country and political parties. It doesn't matter compared to your conscious evolution. Your matter matters most, and that's what you need to manage. Don't get into the negative. It will build gray matter at the wrong side of your brain. Stay positive and mindful. It will build gray matter in the front of your brain. This is how we create who we are. Consciously, we have just woken up to how our lives are going to evolve. We've just fallen into the present moment. This is you without your story. This is answering, who am I? Think of what is the greatest thing, the greatest expression of yourself that you can create. What are one or two behaviors that I want to change today? What are one or two thoughts that I want to interrupt and say no to? What are two emotions that I live by each day that I want to change? I want to become conscious, mindful enough till you are deciding how you want to think, feel, and behave. You know, Sadhguru says when someone dies, the difference is he can be sad, he can be joyful, or a little bit of both, but it is something that he chooses to do. It is not emotion sweeping him away into a victim position, back into uncertainty that overwhelms, so that we're bringing about control again. You do the work enough so that you're so good at getting into the zone, into the space between stimulus and response, that you are managing how you think, feel, and act in all situations, circumstances, and events. The less unconscious you are, the better off our creative capabilities will become. Practice and repetition, practice of surrender and gratitude and connection bring miracles of change. So let's understand this as we close. You're here for a very specific purpose. You're here to create. Of course, you were created first, and now you're here to create. And life is continuously saying to you, what are you going to create today? What are you going to create with your life? Even though we try and dull that voice, we try and avoid that voice, we try and avoid that question, it keeps coming for us, like life keeps coming for us. We cannot get away from our purpose, so why not become conscious of your purpose, which is to grow in love. It is to overcome fear and then tell the world how to do it. Show them how to do it. So today, the paradigm shift is to overcome literally yourself. literally to overcome the person that you once were. And this is something that people think happens to you after you die. No, after we die, there's something of an eternity. What we do now, the choices we make, become an eternity of possibility. So right now is the choice of how big, how much love or fear do we want? What are we going to take with us? Is it going to be suicide? Is it going to be little suicides constantly? Little deaths in victim mind? Or is it going to be, hold on a second, I choose love only every single time? That is what life is asking of us. All of this overcoming of depression, stress, anxiety, attention deficits, obsessions and compulsions, all of it points us to sacred self. It points us away from the personality and back to soul. Now we know the soul is eternal and internal. We know the personality is external and limited. It knows it's going to die. But when we love it enough, we can integrate it into who we are becoming. And in this way, 1 + 1 = 2. When we integrate, accept, acknowledge subconscious and conscious fear parts of us and loving parts of us, masks and what we don't want to see underneath, and then what we do want to see underneath. Because here is the basis. It is a journey home. We are returning to love. We're returning without defense to a place of peace. We're returning to who we really are, which is loving, kind, creative human beings. This is the journey and the process of a paradigm shift, and we practice it every single day for as long as we possibly can. Namaste.